following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
What's up, Downers? Welcome back to the least comfortable show on the web, The System is Down. My name is Dan Smots, and on today's episode, I have a extra special guest for you. His name is Nate Henry, and he is the vocalist of the band Sherwood, which is a band that has been on my radar since back in MySpace days. They were actually the first band to sign to MySpace Records, and if you don't know who Sherwood is, and especially if you don't know what MySpace was, then you're probably too young to be listening to the show. It's probably not age appropriate for you, so might be past your bedtime. Might need to go listen to something else for a little bit. Nate is also the co-host of the fantastic podcast called Don't Feed the Trolls, alongside Matt McDonald, who is the vocalist for the band The Classic Crime. And their show actually is pretty similar to ours in that they talk about some weird and strange topics, and they do so without any drama, thus the name Don't Feed the Trolls. So I was really excited to get Nate on the show. Of all the guests that I've had on so far, he probably has one of the bigger followings than most. As I've mentioned on the show before, the Bad Christian Podcast is one of my favorite podcasts, and they had Nate Henry on a couple weeks ago to talk about a couple different topics, and then they ended up talking about conspiracy theories, but they did it very briefly and didn't really, I feel like they didn't give him a fair shake to really dig into this stuff, because they're a little bit more, okay, they're a lot more skeptical than I am about this stuff. I enjoy listening to it open-mindedly. So I thought maybe I could find Nate talking about some of this stuff on another podcast or in another interview so I can get his thoughts on that. Or, you know, maybe I could just invite him onto my own show and see what happens. And so I did that, and Nate was gracious enough to give me his time. Before we get into that, as I said on last week's episode, I've been working on setting up a Patreon program where you guys can support the show and get a bunch of extra bonus content. I told you it would be up within the next couple weeks or so, and it is up now, officially. You can check that out at tsidpod.com/support. And basically what it is where you can pay a certain amount per month to the show, $1, $5, $15, $25, $50, and each level has a different set of rewards that you will get for helping this show stay afloat. Any amount of money that you contribute monthly, be it $1 or more, will make you an official member of what I'm going to call the Downers Club. Starting at $1, you can be a baby member, and you can get a personal shout-out on the show and access to a super exclusive Facebook group that I'm going to set up that is for members only, and it goes up from there. $5 makes you a premium member, $15 mega member, $25 member supreme, and $50 ludicrous member. And as you work your way up, obviously you get more and more incentives, and those incentives include merch discounts, free merch, most importantly, bonus episodes of the show. We're going to be doing at least an extra bonus episode of some sort once a week. So if you don't have enough of this ridiculousness and your life is still just a little bit too comfortable, you can get, for anything $5 or more, you can get bonus content. And if you wanted to contribute at the $50 amount, I'm actually offering for 3 members to be show regulars on the show. So maybe you'll come on as a guest regularly, maybe once a month. Maybe you'll do a bonus segment if you've got your own ideas that you want to do. I don't know, it's kind of up in the air, but I like input from other people, and if you're honestly willing to contribute $50 a month to what I've got going on here, then you're going to have a lot more input on how things work, even to the point of you becoming a part of the show. So, if any of that is something that interests you, again, head on over to tsidpod.com/support, and you can find links to that in the show notes. Also, again, our merch store is up and running, and we've got some killer t-shirts over there. We've got the Your Government Doesn't Love You t-shirt. We've got I'm Not Sure What Shape the Earth Is t-shirt. We've got Question Everything, Stay Uncomfortable, and we've got phone cases and stuff like that. Just a bunch of fun stuff, and anything that you purchase over there goes directly toward helping me improve and grow the show and get on bigger guests, better equipment, and just make this the best listening experience for you on a regular weekly basis. So, enough commercials. Let's jump into this wonderful conversation that I had the pleasure of having with Nate Henry about Bigfoot, the Jesus conspiracy, and much, much more. So, without further ado, let's get weird. My guest today is the vocalist of the band Sherwood and the co-host of the podcast Don't Feed the Trolls, Nate Henry. Nate, how's it going, man?
Hey, man. It's good to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you, man. Now, I am a listener of the Bad Christian podcast, and I'm going to rag on them a little bit here just because I'm a contributing member to their show. So I have the rights to do so, and nothing I would say I haven't already said to Matt, so it's all good. But
there you go.
So they had you on. You talked about it was the Joel Osteen incident for the most part, right?
Yeah,
with the hurricane and all that.
It was supposed to be about conspiracy theories, but it ended up being
Sure.
Toby's rant on Joel
Okay.
Osteen. So
So yeah, I listened to that, and then it got to the end, and I mean, I read the description of it, and they said that you were going to talk about conspiracy stuff, which is the reason why I clicked on it.
Oh, cool.
Not that I wouldn't have listened to it anyway, but I'm really into that type of thing.
yeah.
Yeah, I got to like 10 minutes left in the episode, and they're like, oh yeah, we're supposed to talk about conspiracy stuff. They opened up the floor to you, and you said a couple things, and Matt, in his way, said, that's dumb. All right, we'll see you later.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's amazing that people are so close-minded right off the bat, you know?
Yeah, and like I said, I've given Matt crap for that in the BC group, and I actually posted a meme on there that was like your face and Matt's face, and I actually send it to you here if you want.
Yeah, let me see this.
Sure.
I've never been in a meme before, so I'm excited about this.
So for listeners, this meme is a picture of Nate and a picture of Matt, and Matt is saying, so Nate, what are your thoughts on conspiracy theories? And Nate says, I think some of them are true. And Matt says, they're not, you're dumb. Okay, thanks for coming on. I mean, it wasn't rude necessarily, but I was just disappointed that they didn't dig into it more, and Matt always has a tendency to shut that type of thing down. So love Matt, love the podcast and all that.
It's frustrating, huh?
Yeah.
If you're not into, part of me thinks like, you know, Matt and I did an episode on the Enneagram, and after the Enneagram, I was kind of like, okay, I really understood that I would apply, if there was a way to apply people who have certain personalities on the Enneagram and which ones tend to be open-minded and which ones tend to be closed-minded, I would say Matt Carter's like the number that's the least open-minded.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just part of his DNA to say no.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
It's not possible.
Yeah, not even skeptical, just like, that's impossible. Sorry, not going to go there.
Yeah.
Which I get into a lot of crazy stuff on here, and even like flat earth and stuff like that he's brought up on the show, and then he's just like, well, obviously that's not true. Okay, next thing. It's like, based on...
I haven't looked into that one, so I don't know. And I haven't looked into like a lot of them, but the ones that interest me, I definitely dive into. So what are some of the popular conspiracy theories, and which ones do you believe, like, definitely?
That was my question for you.
Okay.
Well, for me, I would say that the ones that I think are more interesting are the less urban legends, modern legends, or whatever like that. Like the Bigfoot stuff, which we're going to get into. I like that stuff, but I don't dig into it as much. I'm more into like government crazy crap and like the flat earth stuff where it can be debated like scientifically between measurements and stuff like that. That's more my type of thing. I would say that there's nothing that I 100% believe except for, 9/11 and that type of thing. And even on that, I would say I don't know what I believe exactly, other than that we're being lied to about something. But how about you? Like, what is your background and where you're at now?
Well, I mean, I would say that the Bigfoot thing was kind of the first, I guess, interest, hobby, whatever you want to call it, that I got into that was considered in the realm of conspiracies. I don't really know why it's a conspiracy.
Just unpopular thought.
Well, I think it's like if it gets into the tabloids, like there's always like Bigfoot marries Jesus's granddaughter, and it's like, what? Okay. And so if it's in the tabloids, it's considered conspiracy stuff.
Right.
So, which is a conspiracy in itself that I've recently learned, that the tabloid news is sort of an arm of propaganda that's sort of curated by people in power.
Sure.
That's
to make conspiracy people look crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That's just a theory, but it seems to make sense.
Otherwise, I mean, who else is buying this stuff if that's not the case? Like, how are these things still in print?
I don't know who buys them. I always wonder who buys any of that stuff at the checkout aisle. Right. But if it were up to me, the economy would go bankrupt because I spend money on nothing, really, except few things here and there. I'm like, it's a good thing there's people out there that are dumb with money because that kind of makes everything go round.
Right.
But the Bigfoot thing started as a sort of, I went to my in-laws lived in Florida, and we were down there visiting, and my wife and my mother-in-law went shopping one day or whatever, and I was home with the dog, and there was like a Finding Bigfoot marathon on, right? And there was nothing else on TV, and I was like, oh, what the hell, I'll watch this. So after like 5 or 6 episodes of this stupid show, I was like, what? And there's these town hall meetings that were probably the most interesting part, where all these people kind of come out and they're like, okay, I was in my backyard, and I'm a police officer, and I could lose my job saying this, but I saw this thing. Right. You hear hundreds of people say it over and over again. You start to go, wait a minute. What's compelling all these people to lie about this animal?
Right.
So
people who don't gain anything from saying it, they only lose their credibility in saying it.
Sure, and at this point in history, it's not like it's going to make you famous.
Right.
You know, there's probably very few things you can come out and say, but they'll make you famous. But some people say, oh yeah, people just want attention, and I'm like, that's the dumbest way to get attention. Trust me. As somebody who started a band, there's easier ways to get attention, you know?
Absolutely.
So Bigfoot, yeah, man, there's a ton of evidence.
Well, before we get into Bigfoot, which I do want to dig into, how are you on the other, like the more conspiratorial stuff like that? Do you buy into that stuff?
Yeah, I definitely think there's enough evidence. If 9/11 was, I made a joke the other night, and I don't know if this is kosher to say, but I said if 9/11 was your typical black man in Chicago, he would have gone to prison for 10 lifetimes. You know what I mean?
Right.
The amount of evidence that they send people away to prison forever, you know, just a little speck of DNA on the wall or whatever. Right. You look at 9/11, you're like, there's so many weird unanswered questions. So if you were to be able to consolidate 9/11 as an individual going up against the court system, they would have been found guilty for sure.
Right.
But because we don't look at things that way in our society, it's either all or nothing. There's no like blend, like, oh, it could have been both.
Right.
You know?
It's unthinkable to say that the media is lying to you or your government's lying to you.
Well, I just don't think the media knows, you know. They don't really know.
Yeah.
They hear the narrative and they play the stories, and
right.
the same thing goes for like the moon landing. Like if the moon landing was a fake, nobody in NASA would have known except a few people. You know,
right? Yeah, everybody says it's such a giant government cover-up. Everybody would have to know, and they'd have to stay quiet, and it's impossible. And that's the argument that Matt makes a lot of the time. But it's like, I mean, if you look at the military, this guy only knows what this guy above him says, and that guy only knows what this guy above him says. Like you only have to. And if you look at Operation Northwood's papers, I don't know if you've dug into any of that stuff.
No.
It's basically a document, a legal document that was declassified when people were digging into the JFK assassination, where they're talking about these different plots to get us into Cuba, and they're like, well, we can sabotage this boat of ours, we could like attack our own ships or blow these things up, and they're like, in those documents it says, do not forward this to this branch or this branch or this branch. Definitely do not forward it to these people. It's like only a certain handful of people need to know about these things. And that was an actual thing that happened. And most people didn't know about it. So it's ridiculous to think that everybody knows about it and they're all just being hush-hush about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's and if you think about it, you know, we were warned about this stuff by many a politician in the 50s and the 60s when the, you know, the military industrial complex was just starting to get kind of some steam.
Right.
And who knows what they're able to do 50 years later. My thing about 9/11, my biggest argument is like, man, if we really knew what was going on in the 60s and the 50s and we had tons of covert ops then, there's no way a bunch of dudes just waltzed into our country, got on planes without the deep state knowing they were here. Because, I mean... You know, like the TSA hasn't caught one terrorist, and they're not the ones actually doing anything.
Right.
That's just a tax. That's just another way for the government to generate some money. But they know. They always know what's going on.
Preach.
They know we're talking right now. So
Absolutely. That's another thing. Do you have any concern for that? Like people, when you talk about uncomfortable topics on other podcasts or on your own podcast, do you have concern about who's listening and if they care or not?
Yeah, I always wonder how some of those like ex-CIA dudes and NSA dudes and even guys in Area 51, when they talk, like how they
are alive,
sleep at night. Yeah. But I think, you know, they let a select few of them kind of propagate the propaganda
Sure.
So it makes it all look kind of hokey. If everyone died, then it would be a little too obvious.
Sure.
And then people go, "Oh, dude, you sound nuts." And I'm like, "No. This is this is how Jesus Christ was killed. It was a conspiracy,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
This is human nature. It isn't, here's a guy that threatens the power structure and we got to take him out." Like, so that's what I was going to say on the Bad Christian podcast. I would say, okay, hold on. You believe an entity created a world that is in a universe that is billions of light years long. Then said entity got a little bored, put humans on this world that he created. Those humans could give a shit. Eventually, they didn't give a shit so much to the point where he had to send his own son down to talk to him.
Yeah.
They killed him. Then he rose again and floated into the sky, and a few people saw it. You can believe all that, but
Right.
an animal in the woods is crazy.
Well, it's funny that it's funny that you bring
yeah.
that up, because that's the exact point that I made to Matt in the group forum. And well, he said something about, well, obviously you can't take the word of a bunch of YouTubers who are doing this and this and this. And I'm like, but you can take the word of the people who are into the Jesus conspiracy, where this guy wrote this thing down and it was translated into this and this and this, and this guy wrote something else down, and they all ended up together. Like, you can accept that completely ridiculous paranormal occurrence.
Yeah.
But not that I don't believe it, but you can accept that, but you can't accept maybe there's an animal that you don't understand in the world.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I texted Dan Koch, my band member who has got a couple podcasts, and he's very adamant that, like, he listens to like Science Mike all the time, and Science Mike did an episode on conspiracy theories, and apparently it's like some lesser formed brains that have evolved that are into this sort of thing.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's all this stuff, and he says, it's very dangerous to believe in conspiracies and all this other stuff. And I kind of texted him back. I'm like, dude, the gospel starts with the conspiracy,
Right?
Because the religious goes to the government, and the government talks to the religious, and they say, okay, let's say the disciples stole the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So technically, that would have been the thing that was probably the most popular thing to have believed at the time. And he goes, no. I said, come on, you're out of town on the weekend for business. Jesus dies. This guy that everyone kind of knows about. He's done some miracles. He's kind of popular.
Yeah.
You ask your buddy, dude, what happened? He's like, dude, you would have never have guessed what happened this weekend. There's some crazy weather. The people were yelling. They killed him. They let out this other dude, like this other criminal. And then they're like, who? And he's like, that killer guy. They let him out, but they took Jesus down.
Right.
But then supposedly he came back to life. What? No, but the government, they said their official story is the disciples, his buddies, stole the body. Yep. You'd have been like, they totally stole the body. So, and he's just like, no, that's considered a miracle. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you have to.
So you can
think
wrap
like
your brain
human
around a miracle, something that has no explanation at all, but something that
Sure.
can be explained a little bit, but you don't understand. Like, that's unfathomable.
Yeah, but people would have talked then like they talk now. If someone comes home from a hunting trip and they're like, dude, I saw this animal in the woods. It was 10 foot tall, freaking snapped his tree limb in half and grunted and stunk like death. And I've never seen anything like it. His buddy's going to go, horse shit.
Right.
Like, what are you trying to pull one over? The guy's probably in like tears and a hot sweat, just like, dude, no, I saw this thing. I'm never going in the woods again. And you hear those hunters tell those stories and you're just like, damn.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they have so much more physical proof that Bigfoot exists than the science is willing to look at for some reason.
Sure. So how did you start getting into the Bigfoot stuff? I mean, you said that you watched the show. Was it the Finding Bigfoot or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I mean, I just started thinking like all these people can't be lying. So I looked into the original film back in the 60s. The Patterson-Gimlin film is is like the classic film where the Bigfoot, which is a female, she's walking away and she looks back, and so many people have looked at that film, and now that they can blow it up and analyze it in HD, they've been able to determine not only is it a female Sasquatch, but it's got patches of hair that are missing. It's got like quad muscles and calf muscles, and basically someone would have taken a time machine back in time and given them an animal costume that they can barely make now.
Sure.
They can emulate muscle and fur and movement to go back in the 60s and implant this thing. So yeah, there's no way they had the technology to make that thing So if you look at it now, it's super convincing if you have an open mind and you look at the animal. So that's the best footage they've got. And the thing that I've read about that footage and why it's so unique is because it's rare to capture a female, I guess.
Okay.
Just like certain animals are difficult to see. Like it's really hard to see nocturnal animals, obviously. And a lot of times bears will come down, but they're like rogue males.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And whereas the females are kind of with the cubs and they're kind of more secluded, they're more protective, right? So I think this female was trying to protect her young, and that's why she was walking slowly. Whereas most of the time, the glimpses are very quick because the animal's super smart and it knows how to get out of the. It just knows that humans are destructive.
Sure, yeah.
Forces.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Now, I do want to get into the Patterson footage a little bit more, but first, can you give like kind of a background for people who haven't looked into Bigfoot at all and have only heard this stupid name that we gave to him? Like, is there is there like a difference between Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch, all these different
Okay,
things?
so yeah, from what I know, and I'm no expert on this. This is just all off the top of my head.
Sure.
I didn't prepare any of this stuff, but Yeti is more of the Himalayan Sasquatch, the white ones, and everyone in the Himalayas, specifically that one town that's right off the mountain. I can't remember what it's called right now, but they all lock their doors at night and they don't go out. Sure. And so the abominable snowman that you see at Disneyland doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's got some history of stories. And so that's the Yeti. There's like ones in Australia. There's a smaller one in Australia. I think it's called the Yeren. And then there's some in some like Asian countries too. But the history of the Gigantopithecus, which is supposedly like the father of Bigfoot,
Right.
historically existed in China. They just thought it went extinct because they found the bones. It was like a 10-foot tall primate gorilla, but it walked on two legs. So the Gigantopithecus existed in history. So that's scientific proof.
Really?
They have that. Yeah.
Do they have? I mean, are the bones like on display somewhere or accessible?
I don't know. They probably have them somewhere in China, but that's something that like the average scientist will say, just like a dinosaur, right?
Right.
It used to exist. We have the bones, blah, 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 blah. But then it's like, and there's this weird thing that happens in science where we start to say, oh yeah, well, Columbus discovered America. And it's like, we obviously know that's not true, but we still kind of say that for some reason. So it's possible that the Sasquatch just migrated with the Mongolians or the Polynesians or whoever the Indians, wherever they came from. It just migrated along. And some people think the land bridge, that's where that's how the people got here in North America, right?
Yeah.
So that's that whole thing. So then that's the North American Sasquatch, which is one of 100 Native American names for the animal.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different names like Wild Man and Man of the Woods, Hairy Man, and then there's just, when you dive into it, you're like, there's a lot of history there.
Are we just really bad at coming up with names or what? I mean, we landed on Bigfoot.
Well, Bigfoot is just such a guy pouring some concrete in the back of hey, look at these tracks in this dirt here on this lot,
Yep.
It's Bigfoot,
Right.
so... Which I think is how the Bigfoot started. Some dudes in the 70s were building some stuff, like a house or something, and they saw like a whole line of tracks going through this property, and that's what they called it. So, but Bigfoot sightings go back all the way to, I want to say, was it Leif Erikson who wrote all those journals?
I believe so, yeah.
So apparently there was some scribblings in there that weren't as popular, talked about the man of the woods.
Mm-hmm. I looked into this briefly last night, and I remember Leif Erikson coming up. So yes, I think so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So you did some study. So these sightings have been going back, since people have been in North America. It's that old.
Sure.
But I think it goes back to even further. That's why we have cave trolls in Lord of the Rings, because all these stories that we've had passed down, dragons and pterodactyls and cave trolls and stuff. I don't think they just come out of nowhere for no reason.
Right.
It's because these animals used to exist. So there's a lot of theories that say that the Bigfoot live underground and they smell real bad and they come out at night and they're ugly, just like a cave troll, just like Lord of the Rings.
Right.
So
now with all of this, I mean, me and my minimal understanding of it before the last 24 to 48 hours.
Get with it, Dan. Get with it.
I mean, my impression was that there's this single Bigfoot and there's this other single Yeti and there's this other single, we're all looking for this same one guy and he's just been around for way too long. You're saying that there's, it's a whole species, basically, right?
Yeah, there's a whole species. Different ones. There's some in Russia. I mean, obviously, there's the cold ones. And Matt McDonald and I, who we do a podcast together, was talking about this World War II memorial called The Long Walk, I think. And it was about these guys that escaped, and they went through the Himalayas and down through whatever. And in this memoir of this book, when he's trying to get back to his country from escaping out of prison camp in World War II, they're hiking through the snow and they see a family of Yetis. And, he writes this in his book, and apparently he got into an argument with his publisher. They're like, you can't put this in the book. And he's like, no, this happened. And so you have stuff like that, just like random stuff where like people will risk their entire credibility just to tell the truth about what they saw, and
risk book sales. I'm sure.
Yeah, book sales. Yeah, your grandkids telling you you're crazy, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, there's different animals all over the planet, and they tend to sort of kind of live where primates like to live, which is kind of like jungle, water, tropical. That's why the Pacific Northwest is a great environment for them, because it's super rainy and dense forest.
Sure.
And that's where they live. Better watch out.
Now, on your podcast, I think you said something like 5,000 to 10,000 assumed to be roaming around out there. Did I interpret that correctly?
Yeah. I think that a healthy endangered species, and endangered means it's just low numbers. So they say that a population of animals couldn't exist below 5,000. It just eventually will go extinct.
Sure.
But I think the thing is that most people kind of apply standard animal understanding to this creature.
Yeah.
When they could be some kind of human,
smarter, more intelligent.
Yeah, they might be some kind of lesser human. So.
Right. In which case, if you believe in Adam and Eve, it only took 2 to populate the world. So.
Sure. But I mean, what I'm saying is they could probably find a mate better than some weird marsupial that's going extinct.
Sure.
Right? You know what I mean? Like
some
lower animal that just doesn't have the intelligence to find a mate. So
right. So
there you go.
What are your thoughts? I mean, do you think that they are of human descent, and does that tie into your beliefs of spirituality and that type of thing at all?
I definitely think that, I go back and forth with new Earth, old Earth ideas. I tend to believe that there's more that I don't know, which makes things more exciting.
I agree.
And it just keeps you humble. I don't know. I don't think there's some people out there that believe it's some demon-human hybrid.
Like Nephilim type thing?
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know what that is.
Sure.
And there's so much stuff in the Old Testament that's very mythological that some people just can't. They read it as a black and white book, and
right.
I no longer read it in that way. Like, I don't know if the creation story is a literal story or not. It's probably not a literal story because it sounds like a comic book in a lot of ways. But that doesn't take away the meaning of the story. So anyway, I don't know. Yeah. It could be spiritual. It could be just an animal. I think it's probably an animal, just an animal.
Okay. So you think it's just a smarter animal, like as some would say dolphins or dogs or whatever, or just a level up from them where they can take care of themselves.
And communicate. They have their own language. They can make tools.
Sure.
They have systems of warning. They've shown so much intelligence over the years and just through stories and such. So I would say that we've never dealt with an animal quite like it.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to capture one, and that's why it's hard to find a dead one and such.
Right.
So.
Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears. And I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay. Would you say that they are violent, like dangerous, primitive beings that, or just afraid of us and don't want to deal with us.
Yeah, there's a guy that wrote a book called Missing 411, and he documents that his name's David Paulides or something. Have you heard of him?
No.
He's kind of a dude that's been on like coast to coast radio and stuff like that. But
Sure.
he's talking. This might be up your alley. You can try to get this guy on your podcast. But he's written a book that he's updated many times about all the disappearances of people in local, state, and national parks.
Mm-hmm.
And not just like people who are like drunk and fall off a cliff.
Right.
Like people who disappear in state and national parks. And he'll tell you should never go off into the woods by yourself, ever.
Sure.
Because people just freaking disappear. And so I think some of them are just like, you're walking through downtown and a bunch of Rottweilers come running down the street. They could be friendly or they could freaking tear your head off. So
Right.
You never know, right?
Sure.
Animals are unpredictable.
Yeah, but they do have like tremendous strength, like ripping tree limbs off trees and stuff like that, right? Typically.
Yeah, I don't think most people realize that like an average orangutan is like 25 times stronger than a human man.
Yeah.
So like an orangutan could rip your arms off and beat you with them.
Sure.
For sure. And that's just a smaller monkey, which is why they can like swing through the trees so effortlessly.
Right.
And you look at them and you're just like, man, they just look like they're just floating through these trees like it's nothing. Well, it's true because from what I've read is that the way that primates work their muscles, they don't have this ability to kind of just sort of do things. It's like all or nothing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like hydraulics on a tractor. If it's going to move the bucket, it's like it can move. It's moving it at full force. Right. So if you take the size of a Sasquatch, some people say 9 to 10 feet, sometimes even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking that thing is probably 100 times stronger than you, which means it could snap, a 12-inch diameter tree in half with its hands, which is crazy. And a lot of guys prove that that's how they exist. They go through the woods, they see an isolated tree, and it's just snapped in half. Like, what could do this?
Sure. And my question to that would be, you've got these guys you're talking about who they always lock their doors at night, or you hear these stories of Bigfoot or whatever tapping on people's windows and stuff like that, kind of messing with them. What is stopping them if they meant harm from just ripping the door down?
Well, there's some people who have been attacked, and you probably don't hear about it.
Within their homes?
People go disappearing. Yeah, it's less likely. Sometimes they're curious. Like I've read, like that Missing 411 guy has a bunch of crazy stories where like lady lived back to like her house backed up to like I read this story and I thought it was crazy. Her house backed up to like a national park, and she was home alone taking care of her kid, and just had the back door, screen door open, and comes out, goes in the kitchen, gets something, comes back out in the family room, and her baby's gone and her dog's gone.
Wow.
And she freaks out, doesn't know what to do. They do like a 3-day search, or they call everyone in to do this 24-hour search. And the next day, they find a baby on a sandbar in the middle of the river.
Yeah.
Just laying there, alive.
Huh.
And the cops were like, it was too cold for the baby to survive at night. We don't understand. This is crazy.
Hmm.
So without trying to say that Bigfoot is doing it, this guy's basically writing a book that proves that, like, look at all these cases. Look at these 1,000 disappearing cases that all have 15 things in common.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's forcing the hand of scientists to say, yeah, it's got to be some kind of animal that's doing this. But because you can't say the freaking word Bigfoot without being cast out, people are so damn afraid to say that word.
It's
and
like
I'm
the
like,
phrase
well,
conspiracy theory. People just laugh at it if you even mention it because you're a crazy person.
Right? And, but there are stories, it's really sad stories of like dads taking their kids camping and the kids are playing and the kid disappears and there's no explanation. Just gone. Vanish. Mm-hmm. So probably some animal grabbed the little kid and took off running, and it could probably run 35 miles an hour and just took off, and you can't even catch it or know where it went.
Yeah.
I would say, that's the sad part, is that people go into the woods with thinking that they're the top of the food chain, or The only threat out there is like some bears,
Right.
but I mean, it's probably like seeing like, getting bit by a shark or getting hit by lightning. It's probably one in a million chance,
Yeah.
but there's still a chance, right?
So you're telling me there's a chance.
But people have no idea. They're just like, oh, I'm fine. I can let my kids wander around. And
Yeah. So
So-
why haven't we found the body or a body of one of these thousands of beings? I mean, have we found one and it's being covered up, or like what's the theory behind that?
I've read a couple stories where like firefighters found a couple burn ones in like forest fires where they couldn't escape. They got trapped and they burned.
Yeah.
And they'll make some calls, and then it's like Stranger Things, like a white van shows up and takes it,
Yeah.
and it's like what the hell, and stuff like that, and people go, oh, that's so crazy, and I'm like, yeah, Stranger Things is kind of a silly show, it's fun, whatever, but it's based on truths,
Right.
truths of how things work and how our society works, but just like the mythology of the Lord of the Rings is based on truths, like. There might not be actual dragons still alive, but there probably was, and they probably were around with humans,
Right.
And so I would say that that's a very off topic and trail, but
That's what we do around here. It's fine.
yeah. They have found bodies, but they tend to not be, people don't know what to do. It's like, it happens on the internet all the time, like this hurricane washed up a bunch of random stuff. People are like, what is this? Right?
Right.
So there's been a lot of actual firefighters that have seen him in forest fires. And
So is there like a cover up going on? Like, do you take it to that level of conspiracy?
well, so this missing 411 guy talks about this one case where the Green Berets came in after a kid was kidnapped.
Mhm.
Kid and his dad are hiking in the Smoky Mountains. Kid disappears, and then like the next day they tell the state and local parks, and then all of a sudden you have 1,000 Green Berets show up that don't communicate with the state park, and they're all armed, and it's like, what are they looking for?
Gonna find this kid and we're gonna annihilate him.
Yeah, and the dad doesn't know what's going on. They don't tell him anything. They search for 3 days and then they're gone. It's like all things, there seems to be some, like, let's not spook the population. The population can't handle certain information. State and local parks would shut down. People would freak out. And,
What's their reason though? I mean, if they are like a borderline endangered species, why don't they catch one, say, hey, we found this and we're gonna kill them all, or we're gonna lock them in cages or whatever? I mean, if you can get the Green Beret involved to find a missing kid, you would think that we could take the military, scour one of these national parks, and drag something out of there.
well, I don't think it really benefits anybody. There's a lot of logging companies that I read some reports of these loggers that in Michigan the last 100 years. The logging companies would say to the workers, we don't want to hear any stories you guys have or whatever you see living out there. And they're like, what? And they're like, you'll know what
We'll
we're
see.
talking about eventually. Yeah. And so they're logging these trees. They have these encounters. They're freaking out. But the logging companies are like, if you talk about this, you lose your job because they're going to shut us down. And so there's some minor conspiracies of like business,
Yeah.
not propagating. But I mean, imagine like a place like Yosemite, where you have millions of people come through there every summer. But there was like 75 missing cases last year, I read, in Yosemite.
Right.
But then they don't want that information getting out there. I'm not saying every missing case is Bigfoot.
Sure.
But they don't even want the missing cases out. They don't even want people to know people go missing in Yosemite.
Really?
So it's not only just Bigfoot, it's just that all these places are totally safe. Come, bring the family and everybody. And they won't even, they don't keep the documentation. The guy had to like use the Freedom of Information Act just to get the state and local parks to send him just the number of missing cases of people in these places.
Yeah.
So it took him years and years to compile this book. And I emailed them and I just said, hey, I used to live in rural Tennessee. I was like, I live in rural Tennessee. I got a couple kids. What do you suggest? And he goes, I legally can't tell you anything, but I wouldn't.
All right.
That's what he emailed me back.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, damn.
So in the idea of covering things up, well, in your podcast, you said like scientists reasonably don't want to talk about it because it will discredit them, make them sound like crazy people if they even look into it, which I totally agree with. But
Yeah.
the issue that I see with that is it would seem like the reason why they would avoid it, or the science community on the whole would avoid it, is because it doesn't fit the agenda that they're shooting for. But if they're preaching finding some sort of missing link between humans and apes, wouldn't this be exactly what they would want to find?
No, because maybe it doesn't fit the college's agenda, right?
Sure.
Maybe Bigfoot doesn't fall in line with evolution, or maybe it says that, okay, oh yeah, humans are a totally different non-evolved animal. Because if we would have logically kept evolving, we would have looked like the Sasquatch or whatever.
Sure.
We would have kind of gotten bigger and whatever. It wouldn't make, I don't know. I don't really know a whole lot about evolution, but it wouldn't make sense for a small monkey to go into an animal, and then get bigger like that. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, I will say this is that, if I do believe that if, like, for instance, scientists find soft tissue of a dinosaur, they don't like it because it doesn't fit their timeline.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, how could you have soft tissue of an animal that's supposedly billions of years old? And so there are indications. I've read stories where they did find soft tissue of dinosaurs, and then they kind of swept it under the rug, like, oh, because there's probably billions of dollars in this theory that we have. And if you start to say that the Earth isn't as old as we think it is, well, then it doesn't fit the agenda. So I don't know why that sort of thing continues to happen, but it's not just Bigfoot. It's all these.
Yeah.
It's all this, like, people are afraid of new shit coming to light. And we do what we can to kind of keep the narratives and the explanations of how we believe things. I mean, that's probably why you started this podcast, because it's so frustrating, right?
Absolutely. So on the topic of dinosaurs, I mean, the obvious question is, we found evidence of them, and it's come out, which probably worked against some sort of agenda that was going on back in the day, but that came out. Why haven't we found bones or hair samples or soft tissue samples, blood samples, that type of thing from these Sasquatches or Bigfoot or whatever?
I mean, we might have, because we have found bones of giants and beasts and big man creatures. We might have. I mean, I listened to this podcast, the Sasquatch Chronicles, and they brought a bones expert on. He said there's these mounds of ancient Indian burial mounds that have these bones in them, but they can't excavate them because they're considered relics of Native American history, so they can't touch them. But like, people, there's generic videos where people will take a deer and they'll tie it up and they'll stake it to the forest floor, and they'll put a time-lapse camera on, and you'd be surprised after like 30 days it's pretty much gone.
Right.
So, I mean, how often have you come across a dead animal in the woods? I mean, I lived in Northern California. I spent a lot of time in the mountains and the woods, and I'd be lucky just to find a pair of deer antlers.
That is a good point.
I mean, and then I'll see in the news, like, there was like a spotted leopard that they got on camera for the first time in Colorado in like 20 years. They knew it was there, but they hadn't actually gotten footage of it.
Right.
So there's stuff like that where it's like every day, and like I made a point that, like, they still discover on average between 5 to 7 mammals a year in the world. Mammals, not something living in the ocean that we can't get to. Like something living on the earth that's running through your feet and you can't see it. You know what I mean? Like,
backyard animal that nobody's ever seen before.
Yeah, so there's so much to say that, like, it's totally possible. I mean, there's places in Canada that are the size of a state in America that are uninhabited. Yeah. Like, you could take the state of Tennessee and drop it in northern Canada, and there's nobody living in that entire, 300 or 400 square miles. And there's dudes out there that'll hike. They'll spend 6 days and they'll hike in, and they'll get shit thrown at them, and they'll get growls, and they'll get bluff charges from these animals. But plenty of hunters and hikers have had encounters, and they almost have sort of from what I've read, they have sort of a breakdown, psychological breakdown, because they can't tell their wife, they can't tell their family, they can't tell their friends. Right. And they don't really know who to talk to, so they kind of go on these podcasts with these guys like you and I who are like, drop it, tell us. And they'll start crying, and it's like a therapy session. Right. And you can tell they've just undergone tremendous psychological stress.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can fake that. I don't think you can fake that very well.
Absolutely. Now, outside of anecdotal evidence, which I think is pretty valid given the vast amounts of stories that we hear, like all telling the same story, are there other things like videos? I mean, like I said, the Patterson video, the classic.
Sure.
Is there anything other than that is compelling? Like I saw maybe one or two others, like a drone footage one that looked a little suspicious, and one that was taken by a family out in the woods, and then you see it like just jumping away and flailing its arms. It looked pretty hard to fake.
Totally.
What's your best, most compelling piece of visual evidence outside of stories?
I stopped kind of looking at the footage because the footage, I don't know, it's kind of frustrating. It's like any conspiracy guy that's like 90% of it's just horseshit.
Yes.
So you have to you just get tired of sifting through all the garbage.
Right.
And, it's the YouTube generation. People love to get views, so they'll do anything they can to get views.
Yep.
And there's probably 50 to 100,000 people who actively, type this into their browser every morning.
Right.
So there's ways to get views. I mean,
yeah, people are making money off of putting on a monkey costume and filming it and graining it up
Sure.
in Final Cut or whatever, and saying that it's real.
Yeah.
So,
and then I do video editing on the side, so it's like
Mhm.
I know like some of these things where it's pretty hard. But most of the time, you get just somebody who's out in the woods enjoying themselves, and then all of a sudden they get that feeling of like something's watching them or whatever.
Mhm.
And then they get a glimpse, and then they basically poop themselves. The fight or flight tendency kicks in, and they try to film this thing, and they're shaking and they're freaked out. And it's not just like random people; it's like people who been hunting in the woods their whole lives.
Mhm.
So
Not people who are scared to go in the woods to begin with. So,
yeah.
Now, on the Patterson footage, I'm sure you've probably seen it. There's the video of the guy who's like basically doing a seminar where he's showing the original costume that they wore and talking about the guy that almost stiffed him on money because he was broke and blah, blah, blah. He was in a bunch of legal trouble. The guy who filmed it. And he's explaining how the breasts on this female Bigfoot would have possibly been able to bounce up and down, not to get too explicit, but like the material stretches in multiple ways, and he's trying to explain that away. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you think that discredits it, or do you think he's just out there making his own buck?
I don't know. There's a documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Bigfoot: The Untold Story or something like that. And the guy, they bring in a Hollywood guy, and he kind of shows like, dude, this is not I don't know what this is, but this isn't a costume.
Sure.
Anybody who has an open mind that looks at it from a costume designer's perspective, 9 times out of 10 they say this is not a costume.
Sure.
Like, there's no way they made cleavage bounce in the 60s on a suit. And why the hell would they make a female one? It wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
They'd want it to look like King Kong and be this giant, scary-looking monkey.
Yep.
And that was already something that they knew. So, if anything, a female discredits your story. It's like, why send a woman to the grave at Jesus's, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't want to compare Sasquatch and Jesus, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help your narrative if you're sending a woman at a time when women were secondhand humans in society or whatever you want to call it. But
which was still the case when this was what, the 60s, 70s, or whatever.
Yeah, it was in like the mid 60s, I think.
Right, a time when a woman's word still didn't mean as much as a man's word. So
sure,
to throw that in there doesn't really add up.
But I don't even think they knew it was a female till later, until they could actually look at it and they can kind of see that, oh, it has breasts.
Yeah.
And
also, why didn't this guy that made the suit and all that, why didn't he come out sooner? Like back when the whole hysteria was going on.
Well, he would have made $1 billion selling those damn suits. So the guy's an idiot, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if he makes a suit that looks that real, and at that point in time, that'd be like coming out with like an electric car in 1930. Yeah, you could drive this thing for free. It would have been like, it would have been a time machine. It would have been this amazing piece of equipment for Hollywood, for any of these people, because the King Kong movies go back to black and white TV, so he would have had a really awesome technology.
Right.
But he doesn't. He just makes up some of his own conspiracy. Well, I got paid, and then he got his 5 minutes of fame. Or maybe he was paid off by someone who is trying to keep it hush-hush today. Like, hey, man, discredit this video.
Right. You're talking my language now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that shit happens, man. And people just are so like, why? What's the, it's like, well, there's a lot of money to be lost a lot of times. Got to keep that stuff hush-hush. Yeah, so the Bigfoot thing, man, with the female, and I think that helps it out. Definitely, that really helps that piece of footage. And there's been some people who have stabilized it, and they can even see like scar tissue and stuff on the animal.
Like in all the movies, the CIA looking at old grainy footage and saying, enhance.
Yeah.
Is that the technology that we actually have now?
I mean, you can definitely better than back in the day.
Sure.
So,
sure.
I mean, they can basically make it like an HD footage. And they didn't used to be able to do that. They can take individual photos of every frame and then clean it up from there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same thing with like the JFK conspiracy. They have better ways of looking at the footage now.
Right.
And going, hey, this is one magical bullet,
Now, one of my biggest skepticisms as a guy with a very heavy tinfoil hat is that if this were real and somebody were trying to keep it hush-hush, no matter who they are, they've got some power. So I have a problem just believing anything that is on like the Discovery Channel or the History Channel or has a reality TV show. I mean, like if these things are real and they don't want us to know about it, why would they talk about it at all?
Well, it's not like it's not like Edward Snowden's leaking documents about Bigfoot.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that controversial. But it's somewhere on that list of things that are, like I guess Teddy Roosevelt went on a couple Bigfoot hunts. So there are certain people in the government who don't care, but then there's certain people that seem to keep it more quiet. I don't know why that is.
Sure.
But I definitely think that like everything's been on Discovery, and you'd be hard pressed to find anything that hasn't been on there.
Flat Earth has never
everything
been
from
on
aliens. Flat Earth has never been on there, but Flat Earth is also kind of a new thing. So, from what I've read, I don't know, is it new? I'm not sure actually.
The boom is within the last 5 years or so, but there's been crazies out there for a long time. So,
yeah, I do have one funny story to kind of talk about Bigfoot, and then
sure,
maybe I've kicked it to the curb. But my buddy I called the other night, he listens to a bunch of conspiracy theory podcasts, and he and a couple buddies at work believe, and he lives in Boise, Idaho. And I was on speakerphone with my other friend, and he was with a bunch of dudes at this lake house, and they were all sitting around on the porch, and he put me on speaker, and my buddy jokingly said, like, "Hey Nate, tell one of your Bigfoot stories," right?
Of course.
And they all started laughing, and then one of his buddies goes, "Oh, I believe," and then my buddy goes, "Yeah, you guys should talk because you guys are you're in the same camp." And then he goes, "Nate, I got to tell you this story." And I go, "What?" He goes, "Well, there's this one professor at Boise State. His name's Dr. Jeff Meldrum. And he's like the most legit scientist that actually can tell you way more, has like over 500 foot casts and can show you the
500
ridges in the
casts?
feet.
Oh, 500
casts of
feet.
different castings of Bigfoot feet. Yeah.
Sure.
And ones that are so good, you can actually see the like ridges in the toes and scar tissue and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But he does seminars all the time about primates and cryptozoology and primate hair and DNA and all that stuff. But so they jokingly invited this guy to his company's like morale weekend or whatever. They rented this place and they went out. The whole company went, one of those things.
Yeah.
And then they invited a bunch of speakers just for like morale and entertainment and all this stuff. So everyone thought this guy was going to come and talk about Bigfoot and it was going to be like a comedian.
Right.
So Jeff Meldrum shows up, and within 10 minutes, he had everyone just doing the head turn all over the place. Like, what the hell is going on? Right?
Yep.
Everyone, and then the guys that kind of believed were laughing like,
welcome to the other side.
Yeah. And by the end of his presentation, he was like, had a whole line of people was selling his books and showing them the casts, and everyone was just pooping their pants. So
That's awesome.
Those are the kinds of dudes that'll make you a believer, and they don't get shut down. It's not, it's not Russian. It's not Russian conspiracy, protecting the nation kind of stuff.
Sure.
It's just something that's in the old black box that we don't like to get out very much. But I don't know why it's in that damn box. But
Sure.
so yeah, I mean, honestly, Bigfoot to me is like, it's like child's play now. It's like I don't even really like to debate it with people because it just seems so obvious that it exists, and there's so much evidence. It's like, let's talk about aliens or something, because that seems more fun, right?
Sure. Well, if you've got time, we could record a little bit more for a bonus segment and talk about some aliens.
Yeah, we could talk about that for another. My kids haven't woken up yet, so
Awesome. Well, yeah, man, this stuff is all very fascinating, and like I said, it's not something that I've really dug into before today. It's just been kind of, I've taken it the same way everybody else does, just laughing it off. Oh, there's that thing, which is stupid of me to do because I look into much more crazy and socially accepted as stupid theories than Bigfoot. But so I appreciate you coming on and talking about that stuff. Before we go, is there anything that you want to plug, like your show, your band, that type of thing? Tell people where they can find out some stuff about you.
Yeah, totally. So we are. I'm in the band Sherwood. If you didn't hear that part, we've got like 3 or 4 records out. We're doing a tour at the end of October, and that's going to like 8 or 9 shows in the Midwest. If you can go to sherwoodmusic.net if you want to come to a show and talk to me about conspiracy theories, I'd love to chat with you about all that stuff. We got music on Spotify. I also do a podcast with Matt McDonald of the band Classic Crime called Don't Feed the Trolls. And those are my 2 things to keep me busy. But yeah, check out Sherwood and Don't Feed the Trolls, and keep supporting people who say crazy stuff on the internet.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, man, thanks so much for coming on, and I hope that we can do this again in the future. And now, like I said, we're going to get into some bonus talk about, I want to know what your band thinks about your crazy thoughts and your family and all that stuff. We can talk about some aliens, but
awesome.
For those of you that aren't going to stick around for that, Nate, thanks so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, appreciate it.
No problem. Have a good one. Hey, guys. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Nate Henry as much as I did. As I said at the beginning of the show, we're starting up a new patron program called the Downers Club. It's a way for you to just give back a little bit to the show. I do have a certain amount of expenses that have to be covered monthly and annually to keep things running, so any way that you can help contribute, that'd be fantastic. And if you don't have the extra money lying around, that's totally fine. I'm going to keep giving you guys free episodes, whether you like it or not. But if you want to contribute, as I said, for anything over $5, you get the bonus content, which this week will include an entire extra hour that I recorded with Nate Henry, where we dug into life, aliens, outer space, a little bit of ghosts, 9/11, JFK, and much, much more. So if you had fun during this episode, the bonus content is way more laid back and possibly more entertaining. So, if you're interested in that, tsidpod.com/support and become a member of the Downers Club. Other than that, because I've already talked way too much in this episode, I'm going to breeze through these commercials as quickly as I possibly can. Merch. Get it. tsidpod.com/merch. Facebook.com/The System Is Down. Twitter handle @TSIDpod. And of course, please subscribe and review the show on iTunes. That is a great way to help us build legitimacy and build this show into something bigger and better every single week. So, do all of that stuff, and I'll be right back here next week with some more fun, comfortable conversations for you. Until then, question everything and stay uncomfortable. Thanks.
This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.